This is the Great Equalizer, a parenting podcast about the realities of being a mom
or dad
in the 2020s. We are your hosts, Sam
and Charlene,
and we believe we're all rocking the same kind of crazy.
So let's get real, let's get honest, and let's have a laugh about the ups and downs of our current upside down. Hashtag no judgies.
On this episode of The Great Equalizer, we continue to unpack maternal mental health in South Africa.
Against the backdrop of the trial and sentencing of Lauren Dickason, and more specifically, the IVF journey.
With special guest and mom of four, Raylene de Villiers. A very warm welcome back to the show, to you, our listeners and viewers, and to our guest, Raylene de Villiers, mom of four, sleep consultant and a former friend and confidant of Lauren Dickason, the South African mom who was recently found guilty of murdering her three daughters, Liane, who was 6, and Karla and Maya, who were 2. If at any point during these 2 episodes you are worried about your or someone else's mental health, please contact your GP or your local clinic or the South African Depression and Anxiety Group on 011-234-4837. For additional resources, please refer to our show notes.
Again, we want to reiterate that we do not condone murder. This is not to excuse the act itself. Where we left off in the last episode is that Lauren pleaded guilty to infanticide and not guilty to murder, but was found guilty for murder. And we unpacked the implications of this in the mothering community.
All right. No one, least of all Lauren herself, is letting Lauren off the hook. But for us, the fact that she was found guilty for murder and not infanticide means that the New Zealand judicial system saw this as a one-time thing. They considered Lauren's actions premeditative and did not consider that she was insane at the time of the murders. But what's done is done, and we aren't arguing to overrule the court's decision. However, there are plenty of implications around that decision, which we did discuss in the last episode. So if you are tuning in and you did not listen to that episode, please go back and hear, because it kind of leads into and bleeds into this episode.
So one thing we didn't discuss before, however, was the issue of IVF, which is something that you have a lot of experience with, Raylene.
Yes, sadly.
So we've spoken about your IVF journey, your journey to becoming a mother to your 4 children. So how old are your children now?
Okay, so I have triplet girls. They are 12. They turned 13 in December. And then my son was born 2 years after the girls arrived. So I had 4 children under the age of 2 once upon a time. And he turns 11 next year. So it's been a good long years since the IVF journey, but sadly the scars run deep.
I was just I could jokingly say here, oh my God, and you're still alive and with us.
You've made it, yeah.
You know?
And then you realize that it's actually not a joking matter.
No.
And funnily enough, when Raylene and I first met, Raylene was a sleep consultant who helped me with my boys. And you mentioned to me that you had 4 kids,
yep.
and 3 of them being triplets, and I went, "Are you okay?" Or I said something to that effect. I was like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" In the same way that it's very revealing about my state of mind right now when someone reveals to me that they are pregnant. That's the first thing I say. Not congratulations, I say, "Oh, okay, are you okay? How do you feel about this?" Which is, like I say, it says a lot about me. I actually apologized to you after that,
You
Ray.
did.
But I think a lot of people will say things like that really flippantly about having 4 children and 4 children under 2 at the time for you.
Yep.
When I realized that you'd been through this fertility journey, it dawned on me how inappropriate it is to comment like that.
Thank you. It doesn't bother me anymore because it happens so often.
Yeah.
That it doesn't really bother me anymore. But it was really great that you could at least see, from my point of view, the journey to get there, A, was difficult, and B, the journey of motherhood was even more difficult. So the fact that I'm still standing and I'm not an alcoholic is a good thing.
I guess also as an IVF, I always think to myself the pressure there must be from society on a IVF mom or a mom who has had children by way of IVF is the fact that I guess the mentality is you wanted this, so you better be bloody grateful. Don't you dare complain.
Yeah,
You wanted this. You know, we all, you know, whether we wanted it or not, it doesn't change the degree of difficulty.
Absolutely. So my first three, obviously, the triplets were IVF babies. They were conceived on the 7th IVF. And my son was natural, so he wasn't planned. He just arrived. So there was once upon a time when I thought, my gosh, but God must have a sense of humor, because I prayed so hard and everyone prayed so hard for us that he said, okay, have four.
Surprise.
And then deal with it.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's been a hard journey in terms of motherhood, especially the first couple of years. I mean, they were crazy.
Also, like, I mean, triplets. Like, I can't even imagine twins. Then to now be faced with, like, newborns.
Yes.
All three needing the same thing at the same time. And my 2 kids are 2 years apart, and I often complain about, just stop. I can't have both of you coming at me constantly at the same time. And I guess as they get older, it's different. But I'm trying to just imagine what it must have been like for you. Not to even talk about the heartache of having to do it going 7 rounds, and the I guess disappointment or the feeling deflated when it wasn't successful, and all the trauma from that, not to mention the financial strain from having to pay for all of those rounds of IVF. These are all things that affect your mental health, and now you're sleep deprived with three babies.
And at the time I was still working in corporate, so I had a full-time job. I had 4 children. It was nuts.
But you better be grateful, Raylene, because you wanted this.
That is exactly it. That is the voice in your head.
Yes.
And the voice from other people. I had a friend tell me, and both my kids are biological and planned, so I suppose I did ask for it. She's like, well, what did you expect when you became a mother? You know? And
well, not this. You know what I did expect was this natural maternal instinct, and to just be like, oh, what a miracle.
And to have, like, you know, an endless flow of patience just seep through me.
Yeah.
And to, you know.
And then when you don't, you feel like a terrible mother, because that's what you're conditioned to believe.
Absolutely. And in the case of Lauren, I mean, she had twins. Multiples are not easy. Certainly twins, or even higher order, which is what I had. And there's a whole new dynamic when there's more than one baby that you have to be looking after.
So you, Ray, your IVF journey, albeit now 13 years back, and more, because it was 5 years, right?
It was.
It was 5 years in the running that you spent trying to conceive.
Yes.
And your journey ran largely parallel to Lauren's experience. You've said to us off mic that your journey is pretty much the same, barring Lauren's immigration.
Yeah.
And we've spoken about why. Well, we spoke in the last episode about relatability, but that rang so true for me, or that resonated a lot for me. That okay, you experienced this, and there's a whole other layer that I feel wasn't adequately explored in any coverage or in court when it came to the Dickasons case of what does IVF look like for South African couples? So you're going to tell me, you're going to tell us, you're going to tell our listeners, what did your fertility journey look like from when you got married? How old were you? What did it look like? What was your path?
It was a long path. So here's the book, right? So this book over here, one of the chapters in it is my story from beginning to end of how I actually conceived my girls and, of course, my son again. But my journey started in 2006. Oh, that sounds long ago.
It does. It does.
We had been married, my husband and I, for about 6 months, and we decided we should maybe think of children. And I always knew I wanted to be a mom, always. So I thought, well, yes, let's try. So 6 months into the journey, nothing happened. So I saw a fertility specialist. And the thing about a fertility specialist is that when you go to them, they know you want to be pregnant ASAP. Okay. And so their business is get this woman pregnant as quick as possible by any means possible. Okay. So when I first went there, my husband was actually not even in the country. He was away. He was in China, I think. And when I got to the clinic, luckily, I was on day 2 of my cycle. So they said, let's just start right now, today.
Wow, the first consultation.
The very first consultation.
Wow.
I
okay.
happened to be on day 2, and day 2 is when they normally pump you with hormones. So they said, well, look, you're in luck. Let's go for it.
How did they know that you were on, based on your cycle, based on when you last
The
had your
information you
period?
had to fill out in a form.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So the very first appointment, day 1, met the doctor, and he said, let's go for IUI, which is intrauterus
Utrinal
Insemination. Intrauterine insemination.
Yeah, that one. So that's basically where they just inject the sperm via a cannula into you.
Okay.
So that was it.
And you had already your husband had deposited.
No. So when he came back from overseas, I said, well, surprise.
Okay, so you start with the hormone treatments
Yes,
first, right?
Yes. So you start with the hormone treatments first. So that takes about 10, 14 days for the eggs to mature.
Wait, hang on. Let's take a step back. What does that look like, the hormone process? Because that's hard. You're injecting yourself.
Yep.
What does
Daily.
it look like? Where do you inject yourself?
In your
How
tummy.
did you feel about that? Were you being brave? Were
That's
you
a lot. Like that
excited?
to me, if someone tells me that would be, I would feel emotional over that. Like, I suppose it depends on where you're at. You might be excited because this is a chance at.
Yes.
It depends on how long you've been struggling to conceive also.
Yes.
Depends on what frame of mind you're in there.
So what did it look like for you?
So for me, I was excited. I was like, oh, wow, this is it. Like, I'm going to be a mom in like 9 months. And you inject yourself with hormones. So it's an injection, and it's like a little...
Insulin.
Like an insulin injection. And so it goes into your stomach. But after 10 days, I mean, your whole tummy is just bruised with the amounts that you're injecting.
You were happy to do it on yourself, obviously, because your husband wasn't there.
Yes, so I had to all of a sudden start injecting myself, and he also started injecting me as well. And so then you go for scans. So every second day, you have to go to the clinic.
Wow, okay.
Okay. Just bearing in mind, at this time, I wasn't living in Johannesburg. I was living in Vanderbijl Park.
Okay.
Which meant
You have to travel.
Traveling, leaving home at 4:30 in the morning to get to the clinic in Johannesburg, to have the scan, to drive home, to be back at work by 7:30.
Okay, so if anyone internationally is listening, what kind of a commute is that? An hour, 2 hours to Joburg?
It's an hour to Joburg and an hour back.
Okay.
So it's 2-hour round trip.
Oh my gosh.
And that's every second day. So they have to track your production of eggs to make sure, A, they're growing, and B, not growing, there's not too many. Because in an IUI, you don't want to be having like 10 eggs. You'd rather remove those 10 eggs and do an IVF where you can put back as many as you want.
Gotcha.
So you can't have an IUI with 10 eggs because you're going to end up with too many babies. So they have to make sure there's only one or 2 eggs that are getting big enough.
Okay.
And then you're injected with a hormone to release that egg.
Okay.
How do they monitor the progress of the eggs?
They insert a sonar into you.
Okay. So internal ultrasound. Got
Which
you.
Yeah.
Which is pretty invasive.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm pushing, setting the scene here, but I'm really like...
Your
yo,
body goes through a lot. You go through a lot. You're being poked and prodded and you're being
Yes.
handled. But
Yes.
it's all in the name of, we're going to have a baby.
Yes, exactly.
Yay.
So that's what happens. And then you have the injection that releases the egg. And then you do the IUI, which is where they inject sperm. So all of it has to be timed correctly, and the sperm has to be deposited at a time, which is then washed and done whatever, and then injected into you. And then you wait 2 weeks to find out if it worked. And it didn't.
And then it's all of that hype of, yay, to...
And you were young.
I was
Raylene.
26.
Good God.
I was 26. So we did that twice. And then we moved to IVF, which is a little bit more intense and, of course, a little bit more expensive. So the IVF process is the same as the IUI, except now you're getting pumped with much more hormones. Because instead of just getting 1 or 2 eggs, you want 10, 15.
Yes, because those are being harvested essentially
Yes.
outside first.
Yes.
Yes.
So then you do the same process, except now you're carrying 10, 15 eggs. And then they give you the injection to release those eggs. And then you have to go for egg retrieval.
Uh-huh.
Okay, which is also invasive because they obviously have to stick needles inside of your ovaries to retrieve those eggs, which are then mixed with your husband's sperm. And then you wait 3 or 5 days.
To see which ones are viable.
Yeah. And then they put them back in.
And you decide how many eggs to put in?
Yeah.
To put back in?
Because they also, I imagine they give you advice on this, and this is the normal amount we do to give us viability. Either way,
Is it a bit of a mind fuck for you to be like
because
deciding how
multiples-
many and deciding
Yes.
which eggs and
also like the other eggs, do
Yes.
you view those as your babies as well? That you
Well-
then
I still have 13 fertilized eggs.
how long can you keep those?
Indefinitely.
They freeze them,
Yeah.
so you can go and if you were to decide I wanted to go at it again, you could go retrieve those.
And have them. Yeah.
Okay.
So
how did you wrap your head around these huge concepts?
Because also now multiples are now multiples are a thing here. So are you thinking, okay, so if it is multiples, what are we doing? How are we pivoting?
So the conversation of the twins and higher order multiples is you can convince the doctor pretty easily to put back more than 2, which I did
Okay.
several times. So they say they have laws and stuff at the clinics, but they don't.
Wow.
How do you mean? Okay, clarify this for us.
So they'll say it's best to put back 1 or 2 eggs, fertilized eggs, so that you have a chance of either 1 baby or 2 babies. But of course, when you're facing IVF number 7,
You're like, the last 2 didn't work. I need to put in 4 to double my chances.
that's exactly what I said.
Okay.
And they put back 4 on the final round, and 3 made it. Yeah.
So you had IVI twice.
Yes, I had that the intrauterine insemination I did twice, and then we started with the IVF journey.
IUI, sorry. Yeah, and then IVF, how many times? How many rounds did you do?
7.
Oh, 7 on top of the IUI.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So 9.
Yes.
And we're talking about the mindfuck of how many eggs, and you have 13. What would you call it? Fertilized eggs, viable eggs,
embryos, yeah.
Embryos.
Yeah.
You have 13 embryos in storage, And another ethical kind of boundary that people undergoing this process have to cross is donor eggs.
Yes.
So did you do that, and what was that like?
Okay, so going back in the story, we start IVF number 1, which was unsuccessful. IVF number 2 was successful, but sadly I miscarried at 8 weeks. Okay, so as you said earlier, Lauren and my story run parallel, and I know she lost a baby, I think it was 20 weeks.
Yeah.
I know it's not the same at 8 weeks, but I have also gone through that loss after IVF. Okay, so it's got another layer to it than just...
Once again, affecting your mental health. All of this weighs on your mental health.
Yes, yes. So number 2 was successful. Number 3 was not. But now the doctors are talking donor eggs because, as I said earlier, when you go to those clinics, their goal is to get you pregnant. They don't actually care how. So
Success for them is
success.
is a viable pregnancy that
viable
reaches
full-term
full-term.
Pregnancy is
Yeah.
success.
Done, dusted, good job. Everybody shakes hands, pats on the back, cigars.
Yeah.
And also,
let's
I'm
go.
assuming that the bedside manner, this is purely an assumption, is just like, there's no time to be like sad or emotional here. That you wanted this, you came to us for this help, and so
Yes.
be grateful that this is happening.
Yeah, so then they started telling me, well, it's got to be your eggs, which in actual fact it was not, because I conceived quite fine with my son.
How
But
did they
anyway,
make the assumption that it was your eggs?
Because I was on number 4 without a result.
And all those hormones, and so they're through a process of elimination. They're now like, okay, well then it's got to be this. It's not this, this, or this. It's got to be this.
And they checked your husband's sperm.
Yes. So my husband and I discussed it, and as I said, I was fine with it if it happened.
Let's also clarify donor eggs now.
Yeah.
Biologically,
Yeah.
the child is your husband's but not yours. Inseminated with your husband's sperm, but it's somebody else's egg that they donated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this egg, do you shop from a catalogue to determine
Yeah, like
whose
how-
egg you will be using? Because what about genetics here?
Okay, so the donor egg company that I used is South African, and in South Africa, you're not allowed to know who your donor is. You're allowed one photo of your donor when they were a child. So just one. And, like most of the donors at that stage, the only photos we could go on were those grainy ones that you got when you actually had to go and develop a film. That's what I was dealing with.
Well, it would be like back then, so 13 years ago, we would have been viable donors. So if my eggs were used and my baby photo was used, it would be a grainy
Yes.
baby
Yeah,
photo.
because you're not
of
like
little
taking
Sam,
high
not a
definition
no.
digital pics
Not a-
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the photo of the donor that I used was, she was in about primary school. So that was the only one that I could go on, and eye color, hair color, and that's it. So the process of choosing a donor is pretty much, I didn't have a choice. I just said to my husband, well, it's your choice. I don't care.
At this point, did you have that like single mindset of falling pregnant?
Yes.
Did
Whatever
you
it takes.
genuinely, or did you just close your eyes and be like, this is happening, pick someone? Was it traumatic for you, or did you genuinely, were you indifferent?
I was disconnected
Okay.
from the whole process.
So this is, at this point, you've done 4 rounds.
Yeah.
First the IUI, 2, and then 2
No, so I have 2 IUIs. I'm on the 4th failed IVF.
IVF.
So this was number 5.
And a miscarriage later.
And a miscarriage, yeah. So this was number 5. We chose the donor. We did the whole process, and nothing happened. Okay, so again.
I suppose also you probably get, if it was me, I'm thinking I would get to a point where I'm like, okay, well, this one's probably also not going to, I want to be positive, but the likelihood, I'm just going to I'm not going to even get excited anymore because I don't know
No, you do. You just disconnect from the whole
Yeah.
process, because if you have hope,
The letdown is so
the
big.
letdown is huge.
Yeah.
So you just go with the process, and when it doesn't work, you're just like, oh well, just carry on. So IVF number 6, now we're on number 6, was also donor egg, which again did not work. So now we're looking at the IVF number 7. And that's what I talk about here in the book. My husband and I, we consulted with a fertility astrologer, which is weird. I get it.
For
but
some people, it's weird.
For some people, it might be weird.
And I was like, I don't care about if it's a fertility astrologer. I couldn't care less.
Was it against your belief at the
No.
time?
No.
You did
No.
you
I had no belief.
you were
I
just
had
like,
no belief.
I'm just gonna cast my net as
Yes.
wide as I can because
Yes.
this has got to
Yes.
fucking happen now.
Yes. So IVF number 7 was the final one. Okay. And this is what I wanted to actually say as well is Lauren and I, the whole time I was going through all of this, from IUI all the way through to IVF number 7, was when we were talking. Her and I would talk every day about everything. Like, what is the process? What are you doing? What is your method? Who's
Or
your
what did
doctor?
the doctor say? What did this?
All
Yeah.
of that's going on
Did
daily.
your tests come back? What are they saying?
Yes.
All of the things
All
that
of that.
you would discuss with someone that's in the same position as you.
Yes. So for me, that's why I said our paths are quite similar, because we were going through something similar at the same time. We were trying to conceive. We had a miscarriage. We were also on the donor egg journey. So by IVF number 7, I was done. I was done. I said to myself, this is the final one. Even if someone came and paid for another one, and I did it for free, I would not have done it.
Okay.
Because I was that done. I was that done at that point. So IVF number 7 was predicted by a fertility astrologer. You can read the story in the book. And that is how I fell pregnant with biological triplets, my own eggs, my husband's own sperm.
After 7 of 6 failed attempts. Okay.
What I want to add here is that the 7th one was at a different clinic.
Okay.
The first 6 were at one clinic, and then the 7th was another clinic.
Did you change clinics because of bedside manner or cost or
Or because they were
treatment or-
associated with this particular astrologer that you were working with, or are you not at liberty to say?
I think the relationship with my previous clinic had come to its natural close.
Okay.
And the clinic that I was successful at, they were willing to do this weird thing with like lining up the dates of the fertility astrologer, which was
Okay.
weird. I get it. And they were like, it's fine.
We can do it.
So
At
That's-
either of these 2 clinics, at any point in this process, were you advised or offered to consult with a mental health specialist, a therapist, to guide you through the process? Were you given even so much as a pamphlet to say, listen, we know this can be quite a stressful, taxing journey. If you need support, here is a pamphlet. Was it even addressed? Was it suggested? Was it implied?
no.
So part of the process does not at all, one of the steps in the process is not at all any mental health support.
Nothing. The first clinic there was no one. They encouraged you, like, go see someone because it's stressful. But there was no mandatory psych evaluation or...
Like blood tests are part of our process. So before we start, here is a therapist that we recommend you consult with. Go and see them once you've done the one session with them to prepare you mentally for what you're about to go through. We proceed.
Yeah, there was nothing. The second clinic, I do remember on the intake form, there was a question saying, would you like to see a psychologist? I do remember that question on the second clinic, which I, of course, said no to, because why would I need anyone to help me at that stage? So that was there was no mandatory, nothing.
To the best of your knowledge, because you had been talking to Lauren every day, and she conceived her first child 6 or 7 years after you conceived your triplets.
Yes.
Had she been?
Okay, so here's when I now need to be honest with the, what should we call it? The bro code, maybe, of infertility. And that is, once you're pregnant, you move on.
From the support system.
Okay.
Understandably, because it's
yes, because it's
triggering.
painful. Because you don't want to talk to someone who's pregnant and you're not.
You're still struggling, however many rounds later.
Yeah.
How many rounds of IVF did Lauren do?
The media reports 17, but I don't know if that's true or not.
But 17 is the
So
going
she
number.
did 10 more than me.
Yeah, so here I am on like number 14, and you've just had your baby. So we're not going to hang around
We're
in
not
our little
gonna-
group anymore and be like,
we're not going to hang around.
because it hurts. Yeah.
So that is one thing where we obviously parted ways when I was pregnant and I did have my children, is I didn't speak to her any longer because there was that code of I'm on the other side and
You're still struggling.
You're
How do you
still struggling.
communicate that?
No, you don't.
You don't.
You just do it.
You just
So you just,
pull away.
whenever someone becomes silent in the support group, I suppose you can just assume.
Well,
Unless someone outright asks you, were you successful? I suppose you could say, I was, and then you move on.
Well, when you're a close-knit group of women that talk every day, you do know when the other one falls pregnant. So it's normally like 12 weeks, then you know you're good to go and you need to move along
on.
now.
Okay. Okay.
That's a whole other level of, because you become friends and
Yeah.
But we do need to move on. Move on from that and just move ahead with the story. Curious about the cost.
Yeah.
Because you mentioning 7 and calling it quits at 7.
Mm.
How much, and that was 13 years ago, how much were you spending per IVF round at the time?
Okay, so like you said, 13 years ago it was probably a lot less, but in those days it was at least 30,000 for a normal IVF, like
Straightforward.
no donor egg stuff and all of that. When you're adding donor egg onto that, you could easily go up to 50, 75,000 per round. So we spent about $500,000 easily.
Overall, until you were successful.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah, I'm just doing the math. Doing the math for 7 rounds, and I'm doing the math now for 17 rounds, and it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So we're going to leave it at that, I suppose, for the clinics. No psychosocial support, a fuck ton of money.
And a hell of a lot of trauma, I guess, at the end of it. I mean, there's, like, I always talk about pregnancy prepares you, because from, like, your 4th or 5th month of pregnancy, you're already not sleeping well, you're uncomfortable. So it really does prepare you for the sleepless nights with the babies when they arrive. And then you pretty much remain sleep deprived, and if you decide to have multiple children and you are lucky enough to have them, I say for the first 4 years of being a mother, I was sleep deprived and I was like a zombie, and I was mentally unstable and I didn't know who I was. 4 years, because it was a bad sleep deprivation to all of the other things that you go through, you know. So that's just for a run-of-the-mill scenario. Now add to it miscarriages, financial stresses, because you're not even worried yet about how we're going to afford nappies and the very expensive
No.
breast pump and the sleep consultant if we need one, or a lactation consultant, or any of those things.
No.
You're just trying to like worry about getting there still.
Yes.
And you've already dropped $500,000.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
So I worked out 50,000 because if we're going to be frugal about it, but it's
Yep.
probably more per
Yeah.
cycle. You mentioned 500,000. That says
What is that?
850,000, but that's if we're being really conservative.
Yeah.
Hey,
I would say it's a lot more than that. For 17 rounds.
for 17
That's
rounds.
8 million. Not
Yeah, that's 8.5 million.
It's 8.5
Oh,
million.
I made this mistake before.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was
It's
going to
not
say to you again,
800.
Sam,
Yep.
I'm
I did
incapable
this.
of reading that many zeros because I
It's 8 million. So yeah, it's a lot of money, and it's a booming business
17.
because doctors know the desperation, and they know that most of the people that go there are privileged, so they can charge it.
Okay.
Let's talk about the impact on your mental health. You're now 13 years in. We spoke about the support you got at the time. You know, where are you now with that? To put you on the spot.
Yeah,
To
like
put you right on the spot.
I'm better. Okay, I'm better. So after the miscarriage, I was put on to antidepressants. So if I work back, it's about 15 years that I was on antidepressants. And it was just this year, Jan, that I started weaning. And I finished weaning my antidepressants in June. So that was 15 years of antidepressants. And I think you get to a stage where you got to get on with life, okay? You can't always remember the bad stuff. Writing the book helped a lot to get my story out there.
And this was recent.
This was recent, yeah.
This was
so
in the last year that you've contributed to this book.
Yeah, so it's called Infertility Success. So it's a whole lot of stories from women who managed to get to the other side. And I think writing about it, talking about it, it helps with the closure of it. I'm never going to forget the IVF days, and I'm never, ever going to forget the first couple of years of motherhood. But I think you get to a point where you can cope on going forward. So in terms of my mental health, I feel like I'm in a great space now than I was before.
Did you have to get yourself there?
Yes.
Did you have to actively be like, I'm gonna need to fix this because
Yes.
I'm not in a good place?
Yes. And that was done without help. And the reason I say it like that is because I tried, guys. I tried psychiatrists, I tried psychologists, I tried life coaches, I tried all of them. And none of them got what we are talking about. The trauma that comes from infertility, miscarriage, and the loss of the normal way to conceive. That's the biggest loss. And you have to grieve it because you're not normal the way that you conceive.
Normal, if we can just put that in inverted commas.
You're
Yeah.
not. And you have to grieve it in a different way. And nobody, unless they've gone through this themselves, understands it. And it's hard to find someone relatable that you can speak to in a professional way that is able to give you the advice. So all of my healing that I've done myself is internal that I've done.
And you've had to realize I need to take charge of this.
Yes. Yeah.
Gosh. So yeah, to realize that when you're already in a bad mental place, because I mean, let's just think about this. If you're mentally not well, you're not always rational.
No, you're not.
So to be rational and sound, to have that presence of mind to be like, I'm the only one that's going to dig myself out of this very dark, deep hole.
Yes.
And if I don't start climbing,
Yep.
out of it now, I may never get out.
I will stay there forever.
So you needed to have found that moment of clarity.
Yeah.
And that may very well not be the case for many others.
Yeah.
They might never find that moment of clarity.
Yeah.
We've spoken about the lack of psychosocial support, and here and even after, years after. I'm wondering, like, so many rounds, 7. That was a cap for you.
Yep.
17, if what's reported is accurate for Lauren. Is there nobody that goes, maybe not a great idea, but let's not go further than 10? Or let's reassess, are there no checks and balances?
Or we're at number 15 now, and I'm worried about your mental health. Let's take a break. I know mental health support is not traditionally part of our treatment plan, but let's just pump the brakes here. I know we've made already 6 million rand out of you. Can we take a breather and just let's consult with a therapist. Let's work through 3 or 6 months worth of therapy, and then let's reconvene.
No, nothing like that exists at all in South Africa. If you want to do an IVF, you can go to any clinic. They're going to ask you your medical history, I'm sure, but they don't say no. They don't say, no, you can't
There's
do
no
this.
vetting process.
No. If you've got the money, you can do as many as you want to.
Okay.
As Lauren's friend, and of course in your opinion, what are your thoughts on how IVF, and again, we in the first part of this episode we discussed a plethora of other issues that she was plagued with. What are your thoughts on how IVF might have impacted on her mental health? Even 6 years postpartum and then 2 years postpartum with her twins.
Here's the thing, right? In IVF, you're pumped with hormones. Your entire, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create 10, 12, 15 eggs at once. You're pumped with hormones for 2 weeks of that whole period that you're doing IVF. What are you doing? You're actually, hormones is creating emotions.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, as a rule, during my normal cycle in a month, I battle to keep a handle on my emotions. I go from weepy to wanting to be violent, throw things, break things, slamming on my steering wheel, add stress to that, add sleep deprivation, add lack of self-care, add all of that to just in a normal month when I have my cycle. And I hate to trivialize that. It's not my intention to trivialize that because, well, oh, she's hormonal, or is it that time of the month again, kind of thing. I resent those jokes because it is a real struggle. I often say to my husband, I hate feeling this way.
Yes.
I get angry. I'll sit in a restaurant and the look on someone's face will make me angry. Angry to the level where I want to stomp over and shout at them, stop looking like that, which is irrational. Okay. And then the fact that I feel that way, I sit in my moment and I'm like, I'm hormonal. I can feel it. I feel it because it's bubbling. The anger's bubbling up in me here for no reason at all.
So can you imagine adding in all those hormones on top of that, right? And then
artificially amplifying those hormones.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then dealing with choosing donors, right? On top of that, choosing a donor who you are going to have a child with, that donor.
And whether it be an egg donor or a sperm donor.
Exactly.
Yeah, the weight of that.
Exactly.
The fact that you're introducing someone from an entirely different gene pool.
Exactly. So you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with hormones, you're dealing with I got to stay positive because if I'm not positive, this isn't going to work.
Yes, because you got to manifest it in your own life as well,
So I've got to be pretending that I'm positive as well. It's an entire mind fuck.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is the most intense thing
But let me tell you, and again, like Charlene played devil's advocate earlier, now it's my turn, and also not to trivialize it because I don't stand by this thinking. But, you know, people give a time limit to postpartum depression. You know, what, you 2 years postpartum, you're not a new mom. Why haven't you lost the weight? Why are you still depressed?
Yeah.
You know, baby blues has a limit. Similarly, I would imagine for IVF, it's like, come on, your kids are 6 now. They're 13 now. They're 2 now. You're not being pumped full of hormones now. Why are you still being affected by that?
There has to be residual implications of those hormones in your body.
Also, how would you respond to someone who's saying
PTSD.
that? Yeah, okay.
It's PTSD. That's what you're going through, PTSD.
Because even if the hormones have stabilized, you don't forget what you went through.
The body remembers, yeah.
So what you are remembering of the journey to get to become a mother is PTSD. You're dealing with PTSD. You have to get over that PTSD and heal from it. You were not traditional in the way you had children. You're not traditional in the number of children you had. It's big, and that is never addressed. It wasn't even mentioned in the trial with Lauren. It wasn't even considered that she had done 17 IVFs.
I find it shocking. I find it shocking that this, to me, is such an obvious point.
But nobody even came up with the word PTSD from that.
Yeah.
Events of those 17 times.
Just
that
like
she had
look
to
at
do
at this person's journey. Like if you look at any documentary or docuseries on something, a very traumatic, horrible, inconceivable thing that occurred, they go back into the history. Okay, how did we get here? How did this person grow up?
Exactly.
What was their childhood like? All these things get unpacked.
Yes.
But here we have a very...
It's huge. And
a quite in recent years, this trauma for her occurred.
I mean, her twins were only 2. 2 years is not enough time to get over. I mean, I'm
And also-
13 years post, and I'm
You're
just
only just starting to feel like it. And I had a very normal childbirth journey, normal again in inverted commas. I don't like the word normal, but traditional. Maybe traditional is a better word. I had a very traditional journey to motherhood, and 0 complications in either of my 2 pregnancies or either of my 2 births. And only 4 years after my second one was born did I start feeling, she's 5 now. When she was 4, I started feeling like I could see some light.
Yeah,
Like,
oof,
okay,
this is okay.
something has lifted. I felt like I was on the other side of something heavy.
Yeah.
That was 4
exactly
years
it.
for me in a traditional sense, with no trauma, no,
IVF, no nothing.
yeah.
And it's not prescriptive. That's not to say that 4 is the
number. No,
the
'cause everybody's
number,
journey
'cause
is
everybody's
different. But add to that all of these other things, and I cannot believe we are not bringing this topic up and being like, hold on a minute.
I think, speculative. I feel that should have been given a lot more airtime in the trial itself. Is the stress and the PTSD from infertility itself.
Not to mention the treatments, the PTSD from the treatments, and.
So that's what saddened me also a lot in the ruling, that Lauren wasn't found guilty of infanticide, which, as far as I know, under the New Zealand legal system, would have meant that she went to a psychiatric facility for years, maybe even life, or not. Like, it wasn't prescribed, it was just, she would, if infanticide, then psychiatric facility. If murder, then prison. So for me, the sad thing in that was, and you mentioned in the first part, that the sadness was for women everywhere, really. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was exactly the same. It was, if infanticide, then psychiatric facility, then research, precedents, digging deeper bringing up PTSD, having that discussion and opening up that discussion and carrying, like picking at the surface to go deeper and deeper and deeper.
Just to dive deeply into it, to figure out, okay, how can we improve this process to try and avoid,
because that can't happen again.
we cannot let this as a people, as a society, as a medical fraternity, we cannot let this happen.
So that's for me that the deepest sadness was she goes to jail. For Lauren, she's already in prison. She's been there, I think, for a long time. And I think that final nail in her coffin went in the day that she killed her children. I think she's in that prison. But I think women were silenced and made totally invisible the day that the gavel hit and she was convicted of murder. And I think that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about it, because it made me so angry on behalf. You see women as so insignificant that you don't want to find out why, that you don't want to look deeper at how this can happen. It still makes me furious. And it's, again, I'm not condoning a dreadful act, but I also won't stand by and condone women just carrying on with the shit that we got to put up with and being made to feel invisible. And that's coming from someone who has a supportive husband, or who has a team of people I can lean on, I have a great mental health support. But I know that I'm struggling. I'm really, really struggling. But I'm still the top 1% of people who have support. So fuck that ruling for that reason, is what I have to say.
Yeah. It saddens me also that the infanticide ruling, where do you draw a line in the sand? Where do you say that the basis of what qualifies this to be a conviction of infanticide, where do you draw a line in the sand? Because her twins are not that old yet. It's not like these children were 7 years and 13 years and 7 years old, and you can say that she isn't still suffering from that trauma. It's compound trauma, layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. So the very one or the other, there's grey area here. There's very clear grey area here.
My question is, why does New Zealand have that law if they're still going to convict people for murder? Why does the law even exist?
I would love to, because there were 12 jurors.
Yes.
11 voted for murder and 1 disagreed. But they don't have, like in the States, it has to be
a unanimous.
It has to be a unanimous decision. And New Zealand, they differ. I'd love to talk to that juror. I would love to just sit with them and pick their brain. And what's the fucking bet that it was a woman?
Yeah, I suppose.
Well, you know what? I'm venturing into gender stereotypes and man bashing, which is really not my goal here. I do also need to reiterate something else, that we haven't given a right of reply to. We've spoken a lot about IVF and your experience, and that is very strictly like your experience. And you do mention that it was years ago. We haven't given a right of reply to IVF physicians. We don't have someone sitting in. I didn't want to detract from that story. Mm-hmm. I wanted to really zone in on your story.
Well, if any doctor who does IVF in South Africa who would like to reply, I would love to hear their reply.
Would love, no one, so we haven't named anybody. No one's been implicated or named. You agree that your experience at the clinics you consulted with might have been different, maybe to other couples' experiences. Maybe mental health is more of a focus nowadays.
Yeah, maybe the whole process has changed, or maybe there is a IVF clinic or group out there that has included that in their.
I hope they have.
I hope so, and if they are, let us know who you are, because people need to go to you then.
Yeah.
If they need to get IVF, because they need mental health support.
So if you are a member of the IVF medical fraternity or community, we'd really love to hear from you. We'd love to know if you are a service provider in the area. Chat with us. or if you've recently experienced it similarly. Like, let us know what your experience was.
Or have you said no to someone
Mm.
who's had plenty IVF?
Yes. Has there been a check and balance in place?
Is there anyone you've said no to because of their mental health or because of the number of IVFs that they've done? I would love to know those stats because I don't think there's anyone.
I want to close off this discussion with a point that you made in earlier chats with us, off mic again, Raylene, about mom rage. Because we've discussed this on the show. I've written about mom rage. I've experienced mom rage. I love that it's called mom rage. And we'll be,
And not
we'll
just
be delving
rage.
into it. Funnily enough, and this is really as an aside, is, you know, as when my husband takes on a role of default parent and I pull away because I need to do X, Y, Z, even he experiences mom rage. So maybe we should redefine it here and call it default parent rage.
Yes.
So this is something that we have chatted about on the show and become really vulnerable about. Again, I've written about it. We've admitted to it. We're no strangers to this concept, but it would be careless to equate murder with mom rage. We are talking about Lauren Dickason. I still, however, can't help, I can't unsee that mom rage, and I think maybe that's also why we are so uncomfortable as people of the same demographic as Lauren who understand what she's been through. I think there are some underpinnings of the similar feelings, and perhaps Lauren's case is absolute worst case scenario that we could never imagine. And I feel like, again, that's what makes us so emotional or uncomfortable about this case, which also probably causes some people to go, well, I'm not a murderer. Yes, I've yelled at my kids, but I'm not a murderer. People are very quick. And I'm just like, hang on a second. I never said you were. And I never said that Lauren experienced mom rage. But so let's talk. You had something very interesting to say, I think, about mom rage and murder. And, what are your feelings about that and the correlation that people make between the two?
Mom rage is something that happens, right? It happens often, where you kind of lose the plot a little bit. The difference between the scenarios here is that mom rage in an unchecked or unbalanced mind is what can lead to what happened with Lauren, right? Mom rage is something you can't equate it with murder, but what you can say is the mind is what defines the two.
It snaps.
If your mind is okay and you're mentally stable, you will be able to snap yourself out of something like that. When you're too far gone, when the psychosis is too far gone, she was on a freight train. The minute her husband left her, that freight train was already at its destination. That's the saddest part, is that she couldn't snap herself out of that because the psychosis was already too far gone. And I think that's the difference, is that mom rage it happens, but you've got to be able to identify what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, and I think also that I agree with you, because I feel like the two are so not the same thing. But how frequently are we having these moments of rage? How often is it happening? Is it more frequent? How bad is the rage? How are we asking for help? And how long is this going to continue until we eventually, that fine line between reality?
Yes.
Now we're still in reality. I'm just angry. I'm just frustrated. I can bring myself back. I can take a deep breath. I can walk away. I can have a breather. When do you cross over that little line into I am now still in reality, but I
can't stop.
I can't stop, and I don't see a reason to stop, because what I'm doing here, I need to do.
Yes.
I need to do this.
Yeah, that's an unchecked mind, an unbalanced mind. And it's just devastatingly sad that she was there and there was nothing we could do.
What can we do about ourselves? Because as we pointed out in the very beginning, there could be someone listening who really needs to talk about this and unpack this in their mind. Similarly, there could be people listening who might fall prey to a similar situation. And I think what I shudder to think of, and this is really grim, so I'd love to share it with you guys, is we spoke about how many mothers have either succeeded at killing themselves and their children or are in jail at the moment in South Africa for infanticide, and Lauren, who is due for sentencing soon. And they reached the worst of the worst case scenario. How many mothers or parents do you think are sitting midway between harmony and being okay and that worst case scenario, and what's happening behind closed doors? So, yeah, that's my very grim thoughts.
You know what I feel? The thing I feel, the overwhelming feeling that I keep having around here is, I mean, I don't have other than mental health support, and let's be more aware of our limits. Let's ask for help more often. Let's look at the red flags. I mean, in a perfect world, we can throw those things out in the open and expect that be solved. But in reality, Lauren, there were red flags. Lauren had communicated on more than one occasion that she wasn't okay. And whatever the circumstances were, whether it be because of the immigration or whatever, that the help was not seen through and it resulted in this unthinkable thing. I can't ask people enough to let's just not be so bloody quick with the name calling, because the stigma of, I'd rather keep quiet and say how I feel. This is my personal experience. I'd rather, because people are going to think I'm crazy. People are going to think I'm a bad mother. Those words like crazy, psychotic,
Hysterical.
Unhinged.
Terrible mother, unhinged, unstable. Those labels, people are going to label you. And whether I am unstable and unhinged, and I'd rather those words be used not in a positive way, but those words be acknowledged as, I need help. This person needs help. And rather than the name calling and what a monster, what kind of a mother are you? Over the tragedy of this, I just want to ask people to think about it in that perspective. Let's not be so quick to label our own emotions or each other or people's emotions in such a negative way. Let's rather talk about, hold on, does she need help? Let's ask the question so that we don't feel that shame when we put up our hand, or the shame of not putting up our hand.
You know, because I'm in the industry of helping parents and children and babies and everything, I find that when parents come to me, okay, because I obviously help them with their sleep, when they come to me, they're at a place of complete desperation. Okay, so for them to actually have reached out to me already says, like, help me. So we need to be, when a friend, family member, whoever has a baby and you're in their circle, just watch them. You know what their baseline is. You know. So if you can just ask them the simple question, are you okay? Or are you coping? And be real with me.
Yeah, not the are you okay? Yes, I'm fine.
Yeah.
The baby's so good. You know, we are a little bit tired, but the baby's so good. None of that bullshit.
Like,
how
be
are you
real.
really? Just
Label.
tell me
Be real.
how you are really.
Be real.
Because I know what it's like, and nobody is going to tell you that you're a terrible mother here.
And I think that's the worst part, is the judgment that people feel. Even people who come to me to help with their sleep, they feel judged. And it's one of those things that we must take the stigma away. We must take the stigma away of, I'm not coping, to how can I help you cope?
Yeah, I'm not coping. Doesn't make you a terrible mother. You know what it does? It makes you a normal human being
Yes.
in the world today.
Yes.
In fact, if you were perfectly coping, to me, you would be an anomaly.
Exactly.
Because no one's coping. We're all fucked. We're all struggling to some varying degree.
Yeah.
We're
Always.
hanging on by a very small thread.
Yes. And we just need to be more real and be more honest with each other. As South Africans as well, we're often, like I said earlier, we're often like, no, it's cool. Go to the husband. Go do your drinks with your friends. I'm fine. I'll look after the kids. I'll be the stalwart here. I'll be the one to look after everyone. And sometimes you should not be that.
And then feel guilt if you do get a moment away. Like, I feel guilty. Like, if you need to take time for yourself. And I know this to be true. I really need to step away and have a space to just reconvene my thoughts for a minute.
Yeah.
And then I go and I do this thing to, like, fill my cup. And then I feel guilty while I'm there doing it. Because why am I choosing to be away from my children just so I can cope?
One of the things that I've taught our children is that mommy needs quiet time. If I'm sitting by myself, it's normally between 4 and 5 p.m., don't come bother me. Leave me. Unless you're bleeding, leave me. So they have learned that that's mommy's quiet time. 4 to 5, I sit outside by the pool, I check my phone, Instagram, whatever. It's my time. And I've taught my children, like, if you're okay, you can wait. Tell me whatever you need to tell me about at 5 o'clock.
And I'll be there for you.
Yes,
At
but
that
mommy
point.
needs some quiet time. Like, seriously.
Yeah. I think what's happened largely is that society's made memes and jokes. We spoke a few months back about mommy wine time. And it was never a case of judging. It was a case of considering where we're at and what we need. And maybe for you that is. Maybe between 4 and 5 is when you, Raylene, do sit with a glass of wine, and no judges for that.
Yeah, it's not the wine that's
But
it's the issue. There's no issue. It's the means to an end.
For me, it extends further, that you've acknowledged that, and that space is sacred. It's not a meme. It's not a joke. It's not funny. That is the space that you've claimed for yourself, and that's an hour in a 24-hour span. And if anything, I think that's a key takeaway for so many listening, for just to whatever it may be, whatever you can do to find help. Your case looks different to ours. Everybody, your case is going to look different to mine, and whoever's listening, they're going to have. But just know yourself well enough to know what you need in the moment, and to reach out and ask, and to never stop trying to seek that help, whether it's coming out of your own, like how you pulled yourself out of that hole, Raylene, and how you and I have done multiple times. Let that be the lesson, to never stop trying to do that. And also what you said, Raylene, to look at the mothers around us and to never stop asking if they're okay.
Yep. I even ask moms in the shopping center if they're okay. Like, if they're really struggling, I'm like, oh, you're right. You need a little hand, yeah. Because, we're all in it.
What's the response?
No, I'm fine.
No, I'm fine. I always tether, like, if I ask if but sometimes I've seen moms like struggling, especially when they're like battling to get the kids in the car, and you're in a parking lot, and I can clearly see this mom. It's so weird because it's so relatable to me. I remember what I felt like in that moment, where I'm like on the outside trying to keep it together, but inside I'm dying, I'm falling apart. And I try and just like give them I know, it's okay. It's okay. You're going to be fine. You're doing a great job. And it sounds like lip service, but I think mothers need to be told more that they're good mothers, no matter what that looks like. Even if you're lying on the floor with your face in a puddle and you cannot anymore, you're doing a good job. You know why? Because you have succumbed to that moment, and you have accepted that I need this right now so that I can get back up. You're a good mom.
We need to keep talking. That's the key here, is just to keep talking. Even, and we put our arse on the line, like we said at the very beginning when we started this discussion. We're going to get context wrong. We're going to say the wrong things. We're going to insult somebody. Something's going to go wrong. But you know what? Mea culpa, man. It's my bad, dude. I will put my ass on the line so that we can have this discussion.
Yeah, but I'd rather, please email us if you disagree, whether you agree. Please email us info@thegreatequalizer.co.za. If we don't have conversations, we don't even have to agree. We can't grow. Growth comes from these discussions, and that's what we're trying to achieve here.
You're also more than welcome to send us a voice note on Instagram or DM us. Record something on your phone, drop us another mail with your thoughts and responses again. That's info@thegreatequalizer.co.za.
And then remember to subscribe if you haven't already. If you're a new listener, please go and subscribe to our show or on any platform where you access podcasts. We're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google Pods, all the major places wherever you find and consume podcasts or stream, you can find us there.
And that's it for this episode of The Great Equalizer. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. Raylene.
Thank you.
Raylene de Villiers, you're doing an amazing job at being a mom and a human being.
Thank you.
So are you.
And so are you, Sam.
Until next time, everybody.
Keep your mom game strong. If you are worried about your or someone else's mental health, contact your GP or your local clinic or the South African Depression and Anxiety Group on 011 234 4837. If you are in danger or someone else is endangering others, call the police immediately on 08600 10111 or 112 from a mobile phone. The South African Depression and Anxiety Group, SADAG, has a WhatsApp counseling line that operates from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. The number is 076 882 2775. The Gauteng Mental Health Society can be contacted on 011 984 4038. SA Federation for Mental Health can be reached on 011 781 1852. All of this information will be available in our show notes, so please find it there.
Shout out to our producers over at Autumn Aperture and ARG Studios, including our editor Ray Herbst and sound engineer Stephen Krill. Please review our show notes for more on today's topic and expert guest. And for more on The Great Equalizer, our website is always a good idea, www.thegreatequalizer.co.za, along with our social media platforms on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and now YouTube. And of course, if you want to chat with Sam or Charlene directly, email us at info@thegreatequalizer.co.za. We would love to hear from you. And guess what? We respond.